Hello everybody, this is Eric Adams from ATS Web. I have a video for you today on using a plugin that is designed to help you migrate sites. And also I find it's a great way to backup sites as well. It's called Duplicator, and I've been using it for many years now. I would say at least 5 years, if not longer. It's by a company called Snapcreek, and they offer a free version, which lets you do quite a bit. And then they have a premium or pro version, which also includes some capabilities like scheduling backups, as well as cloud storage, so that whenever you create the backups, you can not only create local backups, but have them pushed out to cloud services as well, like Google Drive. So let me just start by showing you what Duplicator is. We look on the WordPress plugin site, you'll see that it's a WordPress migration plugin with over 15 million downloads. And like I said, I've been using it for many years. And this gives you a good overview of what it does. So it's letting you move, migrate, or clone a WordPress site between domains or hosts. And that's really the secret to this. Is it includes things like whenever you are migrating the database, you tell it what the new URL, the new domain is, and it will actually go through and do the replacements for you, so that whenever you migrate the site, you don't end up with old links or URLs. So the images, the embeds, the media links that are in the pages themselves, anything like that, it actually will go through and update all of that for you. Now, I've seen some instances where it isn't perfect, and depending on the plugin or the way that, let's say, some page builders embed the content into the page, sometimes it doesn't go into those and do the best job. So there are some times where it's not 100% flawless, but my experience has been that for the overwhelming majority of those transforms that it needs to rewrite those URLs and do things like that, translate them, it does a very good job. So you can transfer a site from one host to another, manually back up a WordPress site or parts of a site, duplicate a live site to a staging area or vice versa. And this is what I tend to use it for a lot. I work on a staging site, collaborate with a customer, get all the changes in place, and then I will take a backup of that with Duplicator and then migrate it back to the main site so that I don't have to redo any of the stuff that I did in the staging site. That way I don't forget anything, because maybe I made a dozen, 2 dozen changes and I forget exactly what I changed. So it's just a very clean way to manage multiple versions of a site and to be able to push them back and forth. Essentially what it's doing is creating a package of everything that is part of your site. That's going to be all your core WordPress files. It's going to be the plugins, media, basically everything that's part of your WordPress site, your database. And this will also include custom tables in the database, custom directory structures and things like that. So if I come into just a random WordPress install, you've got WP admin, WP content, WP includes. But if I also created a separate folder in here, like, I don't know, hosted files, let's say I do this for customers on occasion where they have a file that they want to host that's not necessarily posted anywhere on the site itself. And that way I can create a separate folder, put the files in there, and then they can link to them. That's not part of WordPress proper. What I found is that a lot of backup plugins or things like that really focus specifically on the directory structure of WordPress, and sometimes it won't actually pick up on those things. So I'm actually going to leave this hosted folder here, and you'll see as part of the demonstration of this a little later on how I can actually identify that and pull that in. The difference between the regular free version of Duplicator and Duplicator Pro, like, it gives you the scheduled backups, cloud storage, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Amazon S3, and even custom FTP and SFTP if you have your own backup server. Multi-threaded, so it supports larger file sizes for sites. So if you have a very large site with a lot of hosted videos or content, tons and tons of media, images, stuff like that, basically once it gets over about a gigabyte for the archive size, it can be a little taxing. And depending on the type of hosting you have, if you have shared hosting, you could have limits on processor usage and inodes and all sorts of stuff like that. And so you have to be careful of not, overextending your package or, whatever your plan allows you. I run all my stuff on either DigitalOcean or Vultr, Droplets, custom virtual servers. So it's not a really concern for me, but I know having used shared hosting in the past, that can be an issue with some of these backup plugins, is that, the hosts themselves are sort of limiting what you can do. And so you have to be careful with some of that. And even in those situations, I found that Duplicator works really well. But the Pro version also allows you to do this multi-threaded approach where it's instead of one large process that could be taxing the system, it'll actually break it down into smaller threads. and thereby not, overextending or overtaxing. So it also includes support for multi-site. I don't personally do a lot with multi-site, but obviously if you do, to be able to migrate an entire multi-site setup, this allows you to do that as well. cPanel integration, email notifications, support, and it's really not particularly expensive. I have the freelancer version, $79 a year, and this is a subscription model, as most plugins are nowadays. 15 site license, which I'm using the free version on all of my sites, unless it's one that I want to manage backups for, which is really what I'm using the Pro license for, is to do the scheduled backups and the offsite cloud storage. 15 licenses is enough for me. 3 might be enough for you, so 59, unlimited for 129, and lifetime updates for 359. Really not a bad deal for what you get, and I'll show you what the Pro looks like compared to the free version as I go through here. So what does this look like in practice? Let me switch over to just a basic site that I have set up here. It's really just a shell site with the theme tester installed. So if you don't know about the theme tester, it's an XML file that you can run the WordPress importer, and then it'll just create a bunch of pages for you, categories, basically fill in some content. So whenever you're testing building a site or themes and you don't have content, it's a great way to just sort of have things to work with. Got that set up here on a simple site. I'm going to go to plugins, and I don't have anything really installed here. So let me go ahead and grab Duplicator. All right. So here's Duplicator. Tons of installs. Obviously, this is the one you want, this logo. Let me go ahead and install this and then activate it. And now you'll see there's a Duplicator menu item here. And I'll go into settings just to take a look. And really, there's not a ton in the free version. And you can enable debug, trace logs. Under the package, if your server supports MySQL dump, it's going to use that. Some shared hosting does not have that available, so you'll see PHP code. They both work. MySQL dump is much more efficient, and it just tends to work better. But if you have to use the PHP code version, it's really not a big deal, and it'll still work just fine. For the archive engine, zip archive is the standard. They've also got this dupe archive, which is their own. It's not proprietary. Well, I guess maybe it is, but essentially it's just a different model. It has a higher compression algorithm. It's something they've built, I guess, as part of the feedback they've gotten from using zip archives. If you get multi-gigabyte zip archives, they can be a little bit of a bear to deal with. So this dupe archive just works a little better, particularly with larger archive files. I'm just going to leave it on zip for now. This attempt network keep alive, and this is for large archives. Depending on your server settings, sometimes the PHP limits and the timeouts will only be set to 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And it might not be long enough for this process to run before the server wants to kill it. And so this keep alive just sort of keeps pinging back to the server saying, hey, this process is still running. Don't kill it. So if you find instances where the archive can't complete or the package can't be built, it'll actually even tell you. So it has pretty good error handling. So when something happens, if there's a problem, usually the result you get will tell you exactly what went wrong and how to fix it. But they're also giving you the option here. Also, the format here for the file itself, the naming schedules is only going to be available in Duplicator Pro. Storage is only going to be local in the regular version of Duplicator. License, obviously, this is just basic. And if you want Pro features, you would have to purchase a license and then some about information. Let's go ahead and create a package here. And what I'm going to do is create new, give it a name. And it's just going to give you today's date and then the name of the site itself. You're welcome to change this, make it more specific, whatever you'd like. But here's where we start getting into the nuts and bolts here. So storage is going to be local. If you were on Pro, you'd be able to pick one or more storage locations whenever you have those set up. So under the archive, it's allowing you to do only the database if you want. Enable file filters, can choose which directories you want to exclude, file extensions to exclude, files specifically to exclude. And then for the installer itself, because this is an entire copy of your site, you may want to put a password on here so that if someone gets these files, they're not able to run the installer routine to be able to deploy this on another server. When I am doing the scheduled backups, I always put a password on here. You know what? I'll just show it. You can do things like pre-fills. So if you already know what the destination server setup is, you can put in the host and the port, database user, all that sort of stuff. I'll show you how the wizard handles it. I'm just going to leave it blank because you don't know 100% of the time that this is going to be what you are going to use in the future. Now, you can always change this in the wizard as you're running the installation process. Again, if this is a routine thing for you and you have a structure in place, it saves you the time of doing it if you already know what it's going to be. And then again, the cPanel integration, if you have Duplicator Pro and you're using a host that uses cPanel, then you can integrate with cPanel directly from this routine as well. I'm not using cPanel. I can't demonstrate that here for you, but just know that that's a capability. All right, I'm happy with those settings. I'm going to go ahead and scan the site. Now, from this point, it's going to give you any issues, any warnings. So there might be situations, again, like execution times, different problems with the server itself. If it finds any issues, it's going to flag them for you and let you know, hey, this is potentially an issue or it is actually an issue, and give you the opportunity to correct that. Funny enough, you actually learn a lot about your server environment if you don't already know some of these things. And so I've actually learned some things about hosting servers, hosting websites, running servers and things like that just from using this plugin. So it really is a well-built tool. And I'm not trying to gush. It's something I've used for a long time. And the times that I've interacted with them, the few times I've had to, they've been extremely professional and knowledgeable and helpful. I really only want to focus on things, tried and true, tested by me and used by me, and maybe not always over many years, but at least in a way where I feel very comfortable putting this video out there for everyone else to see and feeling as though, what I'm portraying is accurate. And this is definitely one of those just key pieces of my workflow of having this plugin. So anyway, all right. So this is sort of the check portion. Under the archive, size checks. Let's say there's particular files on the website itself that are large. I was hosting a site and building a site for a chiropractor, and he had a bunch of videos that were testimonials from his customers. The videos themselves were pretty high quality, and so they were many, hundreds of megabytes in size. And so this would see that and say, do you really want to include these big files in there? Because it's going to make the size of the archive that much larger. So it gives you the opportunity to select some things here and filter things out, which is nice. If it finds additional sites, so you might be hosting a separate site. Let's say your staging site is a subdomain of your main site. Some hosts will handle that by making that a subdirectory of the main web folder for your website. And Duplicator will actually recognize that and say, hey, there's an entire separate site that you're going to include in this archive. Is that actually what you want to do? So this will let you filter that out and say, no, I really don't want all that. I just want the main site, not this ancillary site or secondary site that is a subdirectory of the main site. Name checks. So if there's anything with weird symbols, special characters, things like that, it's going to tell you. Rechecks if there's any issues with file permissions that it can't actually read the files to create the archive. And then an overview of the database, which will give you a list of the tables, size, records, all of that sort of thing. And then, if there's any recommendations for that as well. Most of the time, and I'm obviously giving a lot of detail here, most of the time after you use this tool, you really don't have to check through a lot of this stuff because you understand it, you've used it, and you see that if it gives you a warning, you may want to check on that. But otherwise, I'm just going through this to be verbose. All right, I'm going to build the package, and it's going to go out and grab all of those files as well as a copy of the database, and it packages it up into two files. You have an installer PHP file. So I'm going to save that just under this video. A nice place to save it. If I have one complaint about Duplicator, it's that it uses the same name for this installer file every time. Now, when it's creating the scheduled backups, it doesn't. It actually gives it a unique name, so you can have multiple copies of backups in the same folder. If you're doing a manual backup, it wants to create a file called installer.php each time. And so let's say I'm creating versions of this backup for a website over time. If I go to keep saving those in the same folder, obviously it's the same installer PHP. This file is not the same between backups. Depending on the options I chose or the site itself, you saw that there were a lot of different options there. That's going to differ between those. So you can't just overwrite the installer that's there and reuse a single one. It's actually specific to this backup. So you may want to do something like, create a unique name here for it. I will generally tend to put the date or something like that. And so, let's make this one February 11th, 2020, 0211. All right. And then for my archive, you'll see that it already has a unique name. It's a very long string unique name. So there will never be a conflict with that. All right. So I've got my two files. And what I need to do now is to actually grab these and move them over to the server where I am going to install this. So in this case, I have this backup of this pods.test website, and I want to move it over to duplicator.test website. You see now that there's just a blank install with the 2020 theme, no content. So if I come into the back end, there's no content at all, no pages, no media, no nothing. So I'm going to overwrite this site with this duplicator package that I just created. So if I come into Duplicator Test, here's my site structure. I want to grab my config information first because remember, I need the database information. I'm using just local testing, so that's why all of this is so basic. Obviously, don't ever have password as your password. I'm just using a local development environment. So, all right, so I have that, which I will need in a moment. I'm going to actually just go delete all the files in here and grab the archive itself and the installer file and move these over, copy them in. If you're wondering how I'm doing this, I'm actually on Linux. I'm a Linux user. This is Kubuntu, which is the KDE version of Ubuntu. And I'm using SFTP to connect out to my server, which is actually just a local server here in VirtualBox. This same principle applies to if you have, let's say, a web server out in DigitalOcean or Vultr, or one of those cloud hosting providers. You can set up your SSH keys and authentication and all that stuff, and then just use your file browser in Linux to connect out to SFTP. I'm not sure if this works in Windows. I don't use Windows anymore. So like I said, I just use Linux and I'm quite happy with it. So, okay, so I've got my files in there. What I need to do is grab the name of this file so that I can put this in to my browser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to that domain. Obviously, that's where my install is, but I need to go to this file. And now what it's going to ask me for is the password because I put one in. So password. And you see right now, it's already created an installer. It's basically created this structure of this website that you're looking at, the script itself. The next thing it's going to do when I submit is actually start extracting some of this stuff in the background. So again, it's going to give me a pre-flight test here. Let me know that everything's set up okay and running okay. Validation's good for, the different checks it's checking on the requirements and things like that. Understand the terms and conditions. Now it's going to create my extract. If I come back and look, now it's actually got my content, the file, the structure itself. And you see, it brought in that hosted folder that I told you about as well. So it grabbed, things that were outside of the normal WordPress core directory structure. Okay, so here's where it's going to ask for my database information. And this is where I need this now. So my database name, Duplicator Test, and actually the host is MySQL, not localhost, which is right here, dbhost. And it's WordPress and password. All right. And the nice thing I like here is that it lets you test the database. So you put in your credentials and then you run a test and it says, tells you whether or not. So you might put in the wrong credentials here and not know it. So being able to test shows you that, which is great. Options for what you want to do with this. And these are all, I just leave the standards there. It's going to connect out, give you a prompt. Do you really want to run it with these settings? Yes, I do. And the last step after it's done installing the database is to let you remap your URL here. So remember, initially this was at pods.test, which was at pods.test, HTTP pods.test. Now we're remapping that to duplicator.test. And then you can do things like creating a new admin account, scan the tables for things, look at the config file itself and change some things. So very powerful tools here. Not things that I use on a regular basis, but it's great to have them. Again, this is just the free version that's giving you all this capability. Doing my data replacement gives me a status, everything's good. And from here, I want to go to the admin login and you see this is checked. So as part of the installation process, it still has some install files. So when you go into the admin dashboard, you'll see that there are still some things there. So this just automatically deletes them when I go to log in. So I'll go ahead and log in here and it's telling me it removed the files. And now I've just got the exact same structure and database and everything. Obviously, it's a duplicate of the pods.test website just now under duplicator.test. And so if I come into pages now, I'll see all of this stuff that comes from the theme test, the unit test for the themes, same for posts, same for comments. So obviously this was successful. If I go and look at things like the general settings, Obviously, it has the right address here. Any of your users, anything that was in that previous site gets moved over. And like I said, in almost every case, it does the mapping perfectly. And that's it. I mean, that's how easy it is to just install the plugin, create the backup, grab the backup, put it up on your host, run through that installation process, which even has security through the password, and you've got another copy of that site just that easily. I wanted to take a little bit of time to just run through the Pro version, just because, again, to me, it's worth it to use for some of the features that are in there, like the scheduling and the backup. So for one of my websites, let's go and take a look here. So I've got Duplicator Pro installed. And if I go under settings, so it's the same settings, but you see there's a few more options here because it's obviously the Pro version. See different features. If you want a feature, just answer a questionnaire and tell us what you'd like to have added. Snap Creek does a great job of customer support. I've had so many bad experiences with customer support for paid plugins over the years. They're an example of a company who really does a great job standing behind their product, and you really get, again, a lot for that dollar that you spend. You can enable beta features, change your package settings here. Obviously, this is way more in-depth than it was before. Now, on this server, I don't actually have the shell exec for MySQL dump, so I am using PHP code, which is fine. And it gives you that multi-threaded option where it's limiting the query size. So it's not going to tax the system or overload the system. Type of compression that you use, server throttling. So you see there's a lot more capabilities here than if I come back into the settings here. You see that under packages, it's a little more limited here in terms of the capabilities. Schedules and storage are really the big two that I'm using. So storage, I have this set up on Google Drive. It's really just such a great option for me to be able to take these files and push them out to Google Drive. So there's a copy that's kept on the server, which is fine. But as you know, with backups, or if you don't know, you should always have multiple backups, and certainly backups on the host itself. It's not a bad idea to have them there just for the utility of being able to run a restore if there's not a catastrophic event with your hosting. But if there is a problem with the hosting and your files are corrupted or destroyed or whatever happened, please have an offsite backup. And again, that's why this is so appealing to me, because I can have my Google Drive in here or Dropbox or whatever you want to use. And when I'm creating the jobs, I can actually tell it, okay, I want this to be a local copy as well as send a copy out to Google Drive. So if I look at the details of this for storage, and it's going to show me that I've got the default local copy as well as one out on Google Drive, so that if anything ever happens locally, I can always grab that and manage it that way. And again, with backups, for me, the reason I absolutely love Duplicator is because it's everything, right? It's the entire site and it's a snapshot in time. Some backups are sort of differential backups, or some backups are just portions of the site, or some backups. I have used other backup plugins, very popular ones that I'm not going to name because I don't want to disparage them. I know a lot of people use them and like them, but the main one that you've probably heard of, or if you search for WordPress backups, I had a lot of problems with it. And it came down to, I had to restore a site and I could not get it to restore because the archive wasn't valid, or there was something wrong where I couldn't get it to restore properly. And I spent hours and hours and hours trying to get it to work. And finally, I just said the heck with it and went and found a different type of backup that fortunately I had another strategy in place for just such a situation. But it was very frustrating, and basically it also didn't work as well as Duplicator does, where, as you saw me install the duplicate copy to another server, it is really quick. It's the entire site. It's really just it's a fail-safe way to back up a site and just have the peace of mind to know that it will be there and it works. I have never, in the 5+ years I've been using this, had an instance where the archive was corrupt or for whatever reason I just couldn't restore it. It has never failed me in all those years, and I unfortunately have had to rely on it several times in order to get a site backup that was, destroyed, or my customer did something goofy and blew out all the plugins, or it happens, right? And so having those backups is just super important. And so the Pro version for me just makes a lot of sense. Creating a package and restoring a package in Pro is not really all that different. So I don't think I need to go back through that part of it just for Pro. I know I'd mentioned some pieces where you can do different mappings and things like that. I'm just not going to add the extra time to the video. Just know that it works in a very similar way with just a few expanded capabilities. but more or less you're getting more control over the back end, the setup, the scheduling itself. I have a weekly backup set here that's running every week. And if it fails, it'll email me. It can email me on success if I want. Again, it's just a very well thought out, well developed, and well executed plugin. If anything, hopefully this video impresses upon you a couple things. One, make backups. You got to do it, and you'll regret not doing it if you don't. Two, have an easy tool to do things like site migrations and backups. Duplicator is by far, to me, having tried just about every other type of plugin out there for this purpose, the easiest one. It doesn't automate it, and there are other plugins that will do things like automatically push, and I've tried those as well and have not had good luck, unfortunately. They may be better now because it's been a few years since I've tried them, but it was fragile. I could never quite trust it. I guess I'm old school enough that I just like the idea of I create this package, it's completely self-contained, and I could take that file to any server I want, upload it, run the installer, and it's a predictable outcome. I know what's going to happen. Yes, it's an extra step of having to do that process myself, but I like the control of being able to do that myself and to know, yes, I grabbed it from here, I put it there, I ran it. It's very simple compared to some of these other syncing plugins or staging plugins that try to push and pull, and I just haven't had good luck with those. So anyway, I think I've rambled long enough in this video. I haven't made videos for this channel in quite a while. I've been doing a lot of things with Linux and open source software on another channel, and I just really wanted to get back to creating some content for this channel and focusing on the WordPress and website and web hosting. So look for upcoming videos. I'll have a lot more of this type of content. I know this is very long-winded, but hopefully I can get this down to be a little bit more succinct. I'll put timestamps in the description so that you can get through this a little quicker. If you've watched this and want to refer back, I'll put some timestamps in terms of like the major breakdown of here's where I showed this part, that part, and the other part. And I guess other than that, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you like the video, please consider subscribing, and I will see you soon in another video. All right, take care. Have a great day.